Welcome to a day in Richard's life, where with the arrival of their second child, life is still a comedy, and the son's milk is mixed with tap water. The other son could only chew gum to stay awake, while his wife had to carry their child around the street to run her business. His wife encouraged him with a smile and made him a super-duper resume, but it seems to have no effect whatsoever. With low education and criminal records, job hunting is extremely hard. Today, he accidentally hit a car. The car owner erupted like a volcano, pointing and shouting at them. Richard, fed up, was ready to throw down, only to be stopped by his wife. The cops wouldn't help them, and the son innocently asked, "Mommy, what did I do wrong?" Only adults truly understand the sadness and helplessness behind moments like this. Every day, they buzz around like headless chickens, unable to afford a meal. In desperation, his wife had to ask him to mooch a meal from her. When his father learned Richard was unemployed, it was like opening a fountain of insults and belittling. Feeling down, Richard swallowed his pride to seek help from his ex-gang boss. He hoped to get a good job recommendation, but the boss held a grudge for his earlier disappearance. The boss ignored him at first, but Richard's persistence won him over, and he agreed to help him find a job. The next day, Richard walked into the largest temp factory, holding a complex application form, feeling like he was applying to be a rocket scientist. He was stuck staring at the form forever because even to be a janitor, you needed a high school diploma to talk about anxiety. He took the form home, and his wife made up a thrilling high school graduation tale. She even helped him fill out the resume, but during the interview, Richard was so nervous he was speaking gibberish. Subtitles. The interviewer swiftly detected his fake educational qualifications, but not wishing to let his wife down, he once again reluctantly set aside his dignity. Let's be honest, who would willingly self-deprecate unless they were at rock bottom? The manager decided to give him a chance, not realizing this kind act would change the fate of the entire factory. And just like that, Richard became a janitor at the factory, his first official job in life. He excitedly promised the manager that he would become the top janitor, even though it was just him and one other colleague in the department. Despite its challenges, he joyfully devoted himself, making colleagues feel competitive pressure. As time went on, Richard developed a keen interest in the machines at the factory and asked the engineers about how they worked during but the response was like, "You need to clean up the floor," not me, leaving him wishing he could turn into Superman. Not all engineers were so pompous. One named Kranz was polite in response to his questions. But when Richard asked Kranz about how the machines worked, his face noticeably changed. Seeing the situation escalating, colleagues rushed in to smooth things over, knowing this was the other guy's survival skill. At lunch, a colleague taught him survival rules, visible from seating. The first row was occupied by department managers, living comfortably with stable jobs and enviably high pensions. Next are floor supervisors, lacking job security. They had decent pay but poor responsibility. These were the so-called scapegoats, followed by the techie engineers, who often acted as though they were kings looking down from above. Among top executives, the most outstanding and diligent was Black Kranz, with nearly half being his prot.gs. However, Kranz was stuck at his position due to his race, despite working tirelessly day in and day out. Here, janitors like Richard weren't allowed any technical interactions. This was about respect for superiors, but Richard wasn't keen on being a janitor for life. Although he used to be like a lifeless salted fish in the past, a dream had quietly started to sprout in his heart, prompting him to bring Kranz a burrito, just as he did when he was a child. This time, Kranz didn't refuse but asked what Richard wanted to do. Thus, Richard became his little apprentice. He peppered Kranz with curious questions about various machines and even noticed equipment issues sometimes. One day, he pointed out that some chips were burned and asked Kranz if the oil temperature was too high. But Kranz wearily replied that burnt ones would be tossed by the workers. Richard reflected, Kranz is like that chip. When other engineers picked on Richard, Kranz not only stepped in to help him, He even asked him to put down his work and listen quietly from a high spot in the factory. Krenz then told him that by just listening closely he could tell which machine had issues and even which screw was loose. These were all accumulated experiences. Richard closed his eyes for a moment and reluctantly admitted he couldn't do it. This meant he had officially become Krenz's disciple. Found Iamut at letter 3c is a complex Iamut 3 Oamut until the letter 2bd Cyrillic letter 4 AB so Oamut. Yeah, Iamut A plus or minus is circumflex I at Cyrillic U not Santander retroflex quarter W O grov Iamut Iamut Cyrillic letter 4 BB at A O stroke 3 Oamut pound copyright. Even though he was still a janitor, he was awarded Employee of the Month, but fate began to play tricks on him again. In 1980, an economic crisis struck. Reagan's reform storm cancelled several welfare programs and factory orders. Richard not only didn't get a promotion, but his pay also dropped. Still, he didn't give up and kept applying for a position change. To make ends meet, he took on various jobs, even picking up a second gig at the supermarket. Sometimes our failures aren't due to a lack of effort, but the ruthlessness of our environment.